funny you mentioned the crocodile. That's actually what I'm reading. It's the closest thing to humor that I could find in all of Dostoevsky, to be honest. And in thinking about that question and thinking about trying to find something accessible, maybe light and funny for a crowd and a gathering like this, I got to thinking, why am I so drawn to an influence like this who is, to me, not funny in the slightest bit at all? And what I came to the conclusion about is that I'm basically sick. And I must be to follow Dostoevsky and read my own work after him. First of all, I was just telling my friend. But more than that, I was contemplating the questions about why is there, so many questions about so much pressure for humor and the pressure for pleasure in our culture, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just realized, reading this author brings up a lot of these important questions to me. And so I thought a lot about this. And I actually think Crocodiles is funny only in how bad it is, or stilted the dialogue is, et cetera. It could be a translation issue. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So basically, in thinking about how sick I am, what else did I want to say? So seriously, I found that it's enormously satisfying for me more to get my education through enemies, or through my enemy in this case. And what I mean by that is that this author represents a number of tendencies in myself that I try to stay away from as much as possible. For instance, being taking myself too seriously, being long-winded, as you can tell, going on and on. And what else? There were some others here, but I'm trying to be brief because both stories are very long, and appropriately in my selection. So I wanted to share this quote with you that I found in Dostoevsky that I thought was very telling in why I'm drawn to him. And Dostoevsky used to have these epileptic fits, of course, and he said they would not last longer than 15 seconds or so. But in that time, he would describe them in a pretty profound way, in the sense of he would say things like he was lying under a sheet of glass in a house full of glass, something like Andre Breton's glass house, where everything is glass, and the stairwell to bed. And he himself felt like he was glass at a certain point, and he said that he felt like on that sheet of glass that was on top of him and then became him, was just a single question that said, "Who am I?" And so I feel like nobody has quite asked that question with such intensity or depth as he has before or since, really. And so I feel like there are a few people who make it their mission in literature, especially, to ask these big questions: what is the collective meaning of being human? Is there, who am I as an individual? And they are sort of designate themselves to report back to us. And I feel like these people, for me, have always been forgiven for not being funny always. And honestly, because I feel like what they're doing is sort of important, I have to say. So, I'm always trying to break down this cult of personality and genius, and who is this larger-than-life character that isn't any different than you or I, etc. But I really have to give him props for that. I think that he asked who he was a lot further than most have ever gone. So the story that I'm going to read, just tell you very quickly, it's about a man who gets swallowed by a crocodile, and it's taken as a political allegory. It could be taken plenty of other ways. And the man who survives being swallowed into the crocodile finds himself to be very comfortable and cozy, and then decides to be a political activist and martyr for his country. From where he is, it's very safe to do that. And so you could take that as a critique of armchair liberalism. It certainly would be justified in Dostoevsky's case. But more importantly, I'm just going to try and have my friend read this with me and give you a sense of it. I'm going to try and jump around in the interest of time because, like I said, he's long-winded, and it's more fun that way to make me feel bigger to edit somebody like him. So Ginger is going to read the role of the German proprietor who is showing this crocodile to Dostoevsky, or to the narrator, and to his friend and his friend's wife. I was just afraid if I read the German ones, I would sound too much like a Nazi. So I want anything Other than that, I would be impressed and make me grateful for. So this is the first chapter, is what I'm going to read. So on the 13th of January in the current year of 1865, at 12:30 p.m., Yelena Ivanovna, the spouse of Ivan Medvich, who was my educated friend, colleague, and rather distant relation, wished to view the crocodile, which was being displayed for a certain price in the arcade. Never before have I seen Ivan Medvich in a more pleasant frame of mind as on that morning that was so memorable for me. How true it is that we have no foreknowledge of our fate. And in the shallow pond of next to the very entrance of the arcade, I'm jumping around, was kept the most enormous crocodile, which was lying there like a log, completely motionless, and apparently deprived of all its faculties due to that climate of ours, which is so damp and inhospitable to foreigners. At first, this monster did not arouse any particular curiosity in any of us. So this is supposed to be the crocodile, Yelena Ivanovna said with pity in a sing-song voice. But I thought that it was somehow different. In all likelihood, she actually thought that it was stunning. The German, who was both the host and owner of the crocodile, had appeared before us and was staring at us with a look of extreme pride on his face. He is right, Ivan Medvich, to be so proud. Ivan Medvich said, because he is aware that he is the only one in all of Russia who has a crocodile on display. I attributed this utterly absurd remark as well to the extremely benevolent mood which had overcome Ivan Medvich, who in other circumstances was highly envious. It seems to me that your crocodile is not alive, Yelena Ivanovna declared once more, piqued by the owner's unresponsiveness. And as she addressed him with a gracious smile and a maneuver so characteristic of women, "Oh no, madam," the German responded in broken Russian, and thereupon started to poke the crocodile thank you, in the head after raising the screen on the box halfway. And then the wily monster, in order to show signs of life, barely moved its feet and tail, raised its snout, and emitted something in the nature of an extended wheezing sound. "Now, do not be angry, Karlkin," said the German tenderly, with self-satisfied vanity. "What a repulsive crocodile it is! I was even frightened," Yelena Ivanovna prattled even more coquettishly than before. "Now I am going to have dreams about it." "But he will not bite you in your dreams, madam," rejoined the German gallantly, and was the first to laugh at the wit of his own words, though none of us responded. "Let's go, Semyon Semyonovich," Yelena Ivanovna continued, turning her exclusive attention onto me. "Better that we take a look at the monkeys. I just adore monkeys. Some of them are such darlings, don't you agree? But the crocodile is horrible." "Oh, fear not, my friend," Ivan Medvich shouted after us as he delighted in a show of bravery before his spouse. "This slumberous denizen of the kingdom of the pharaohs won't do anything to us." And he remained behind by the box. And lo, okay, now I'm jumping ahead, there's a lot of egregious misogyny that I'm skipping over. And lo, at that very moment, the room was suddenly shaken by a horrible, I might even add, unnatural cry. Without knowing what to think, I at first froze on the spot, but remarking that it was in fact Yelena Ivanovna who was screaming, I quickly turned around, and what did I see? I saw in the horrible jaws of the crocodile, the unfortunate Ivan Medvich, whose torso had been seized crosswise, and who was now raised horizontally in the air and desperately dangling his legs. And an instant later, he was gone. Okay, he describes it in detail, I'm not going to read it in detail. So Ivan Medvich wiggled out a bit and was trying to jump out while hanging onto the box with his hands. And the crocodile once again drew him inside to a point above his waist. And then after another big belch, it swallowed again and again. In this fashion, Ivan Medvich visibly disappeared before our eyes. At last, with one final swallow, the crocodile consumed my entire educated friend, and this time without a trace. All right, so then Ivan keeps reappearing because he's like a victim in a bad horror movie, and he just won't die. So then,
Ach, mein Crocodile, ach, mein allerliebster Karlkin, mutter, mutter, mutter.
At this point, all bedlam broke loose. Yelena Ivanovna kept screaming a single phrase, "Whip it, whip it, whip it." And she kept rushing up to the owner and the mother, apparently beseeching them, probably in all self-obliviousness, woman, to whip someone or something. But the owner and the mother paid neither of us any attention. They were both wailing like a couple of calves around the box.
For good he is gone. Now he's split open because he has swallowed a whole official.
The owner kept shouting.
Unser Karpkin, unser allerliebster Karpkin, wird sterben.
The mistress wailed.
Now we are orphans and have no broth.
The owner joined in. Whip it, whip it, whip it, Yelena Ivanovna babbled as she fastened onto the German's frock coat.
He was teasing the crocodile. Why, your husband, he teased the crocodile?
The German kept shouting as he tried to free himself.
You will pay if Karpkin will go kaputt. Das war mein Sohn. Das war mein einziger Sohn. What? You want that my crocodile should be dead?
The owner, who had come running back, started to wail.
No, first let your husband be dead, and then the crocodile. Mein Vater, he showed the crocodile. Mein Großvater, he showed the crocodile. Mein son, he will be showing the crocodile, and I will be showing the crocodile. Everybody will be showing the crocodile. I for all Europe am famous. But you for all Europe are not famous, and damages you must pay me. Yeah.
The malicious old German woman, who I forgot to tell you about, joined in.
You will not let go. Damage if Karpkin split open.
It's useless to disembowel it, I added calmly. Sounding very like Clark Kent for some reason. Wishing to divert Yelena Ivanovna homeward as quickly as possible. In all probability, our dear Ivan Mikovich is now soaring somewhere in the Empyrean. My friend! At that moment, quite unexpectedly, we heard Ivan Mikovich's voice, which utterly dumbfounded us. My friend, I am of the opinion that we must act directly through the bureau of the chief inspector, for this German will not comprehend the truth without the aid of the police. And these words, spoken firmly and authoritatively and expressing an unusual presence of mind, so dumbfounded us at first that we were all on the point of refusing to believe our ears. Ivan Mikovich, my friend, so you were alive then, Yelena Ivanovna murmured. Alive and well, Ivan Mikovich replied, and thanks to the Most High, I have been swallowed without any damage. The one thing that does disturb me is how the authorities will view this episode. Having received the ticket to go abroad, I ended up somehow in a crocodile, which was not very clever at all. But my friend, don't concern yourself with being witty. The main thing is to pluck you out of there somehow.
Pluck?
The owner screeched.
I won't allow you to pluck crocodile. Now much more public will come, and I will ask for 50 kopecks, and Karpkin will not split open. Gott sei Dank.
The mistress added. They are right, Ivan Mikovich calmly remarked. The principle of economics comes first. My friend, I cried, I will fly this very instant to the authorities and complain, for I have a premonition that we won't be able to straighten out this mess ourselves.
I will not sell the crocodile. I will sell the crocodile for 3,000. I will sell the crocodile for 4,000. Now the public will come very much. I will sell the crocodile for 5,000. In short, the German was playing the unbearable bully. Self-interest and vile avarice shone joyfully in his eyes. I am away, I shouted indignantly. Okay, and now Ivan Mikovich says, take Yelena Ivanovna away for the time being. Calm yourself, my friend, he continued to her. I am tired from all the shouting and squabbling of old wives, and I wish now to doze off a bit. It's warm and soft in here, although I have not yet managed to examine my surroundings in this sanctuary wherein I find myself so unexpectedly now. Examine your surroundings. Do you really find it so light in there? Yelena Ivanovna cried with delight. I am surrounded by impenetrable night, replied the poor prisoner. But I can touch and, so to speak, examine my surroundings with my hands. Farewell, be calm, and don't deprive yourself of amusements. Until tomorrow, and you, Semyon Semyonovich, come visit me in the evening, since you are distracted and might forget. Tie a string around your finger in order to remember, whatever that means. I must admit that I was happy to leave because I was too exhausted and to a degree weary of all this as well. Hastily, I took under my arm a Yelena Ivanovna who was despondent and yet who had grown attractive from the agitation, and I quickly escorted her out of the crocodile room. In the evening, another quarter ruble for the entrance.
The owner shouted after us. Oh, Lord, how greedy they are.
Yelena Ivanovna declared as she glanced at herself in every mirror on the walls of the arcade, apparently aware of the fact that her looks had now improved. The principle of economics, I replied, with a gentle excitement, taking pride in my lady before the passers-by. The principle of economics, she drawled in her sympathetic little voice. I understood nothing of what Ivan Mikovich was saying just now concerning this repulsive principle of economics. I shall explain it to you, I replied, and immediately began to talk about the beneficial results of attracting foreign capital to our fatherland, which I had only just read about that morning in the Petersburg News and the Hair. How strange it all is, she murmured after listening for a while. But do stop, you repulsive man. What nonsense you're speaking. Tell me, how do I seem to you? Well, you are quite seemly, I remarked, exploiting the situation in order to deliver a compliment. Naughty man, she murmured with satisfaction. Poor Ivan Mikovich, she added after a moment, her head coquettishly inclined towards her shoulder. Truly, I do feel sorry for him. Oh, my Lord, she suddenly cried. Tell me, how is he going to eat there today? And how will he, what if he needs something? An unforeseen question, I replied, also puzzled. In truth, that had not entered my mind. Women are that much more practical than we men for solving everyday problems. The poor fellow, the way he's ended up, nothing to amuse himself with, and the darkness. How vexing that I don't have a photograph left of him in the world. So now I'm like rather like a widow, she added with a seductive smile, obviously interested in her new situation. All the same, I do feel sorry for him, though. In short, this was an expression of a young and interesting wife's understandable and natural grief for her deceased husband. I finally brought her home, consoled her, and after dining together with her and drinking a cup of aromatic coffee for two, I set out at 6 o'clock for Timothy Semyonovich's, reckoning that at that hour all good family people of specific occupations would be sitting or lying around their homes. So that's the end for sure.
No, so that was 15.
Sorry?
That was 15, so
15?
yeah.
All right. So, should I just get my bit?
No, just,
Well,
yeah, just,
mine's pretty long. So, yeah, I mean, I could end it with that. It's fine.
well, I want to hear your stuff, obviously.
All right. Well, I mean, what I was going to say, I'm sorry for not timing that, I just realized how long I was trying to be brief. So, I mean, with that piece, the sort of element of carnival that's sort of realistic really informed this next piece that I wrote, inspired by that. That I think, something that I think he pulls out pretty well is sort of ethereal, fairy tale perspective or voice. And so I wrote this long free verse, one sentence poem that's sort of really inspired by a lot of the Eastern European writers that I've been reading were directly inspired by Dostoevsky for this reason. So it's called The Gates of Sleep, and I'll just see how I can cut that up. And The Gates of Sleep, according to my endnote here, it marks the site where Odysseus and later on Aeneas are granted their respective tours of the underworld. And it's the description in the last lines of Book 6 of the Aeneid are of particular interest because the narrator suggests that those who pass through them to return from the underworld are probably, or perhaps more alive, or not as alive as those, shades or shadows or comrades who remain below. So that might not be relevant in what I read here, but we'll see. So I'll try and cut it up. All right. Last night I saw a man get tasered on Broadway Boulevard. I was standing at the entrance to the park underneath the jacaranda trees, the ones with the graffiti on their trunks. All those unwanted tattoos that I could never make any sense of, and so they seemed important somehow. This was around sunset, so the sky was something terrible, and I watched as across the street the police tasered a man. They got him 3 times in the ribs, though they missed the second time, I think, because the man just staggered for a moment, out of habit maybe, a performance of staggering, you might say. In any case, after the first tasering, when the man noticed he was unharmed and began charging at the police like a crazed animal, for whatever reason, I pulled out my camera phone, which I don't usually have with me, but I did this time, and there must have been a reason for that. The police have joked to me later. I began to film each one of these taserings with great concentration, so that it looked more and more through my little camera screen like there were these little firecrackers going off underneath the man's shirt, as though somebody had been standing above him stirring up a string of spaghetti with an invisible spoon. You know, the way a noodle of pasta is sometimes flung at the wall to see if it's ready. And this man was in fact airborne, at least until the third tasering, until he cracked his head on the wall behind him with a thump, until his languid body slid to the ground where the police took turns kicking him, as it tried in vain, the body that is, to get back on its feet again. And you could see the marinara sauce, the blood, spilling out from the ends of his tangled hair. And in the middle of all this, people began to come up to me to ask what had happened, although not long after I opened my mouth to respond, many of them came to their own conclusions. All were more elaborate than anything I could have told them, I'll be the first to admit. That right there once was a halfway house, someone said. That's right, I remember that, said someone else. Place should have been closed down years ago. Just then another passerby, a gangly man on a bicycle, who had a rather odd and severe expression, and seemed even less interested in what was happening, that is, what was really happening, proposed the idea of an elaborate hoax, or an incredibly convincing film set, perhaps. So convincing, he said, that there must have been a hidden camera someplace in the brush there, besides my hidden camera, which was no more than the studio's collective rate on the inarticulate. He actually said that, and he was turning the rest of us huddled around my little camera screen now into mindless puppets drinking down Hollywood's sweet nectarous Kool-Aid. Why would there be a halfway house across from a park? Someone joined in from the crowd. Unless the city installed a park later on, an idea which made sense to us at the time. But this may have been because of how dazed and distracted we were by the events before us. Eventually, I noticed two gaunt and boyish-looking girls standing blithely apart from the rest of us, sharing a cigarette with one another in what looked to be a chocolate bar. I remember this because, for whatever reason, I thought at first that the bar of chocolate was a gun. And I felt a curious desire to offer these girls a second cigarette, not only because they were beautiful and looked at each other like they were in love, but also to find out whether they were sharing a cigarette for aesthetic, moral, romantic purposes. And I was just about to approach them when someone yelled out that the tasered body was back on its feet, and I looked back and saw the man was in fact charging again, miraculously so, around the corner this time, in the opposite direction from the police. Soon after the man disappeared, I heard someone whispering behind me. It was one of the two girls from before, it turned out. And they were snickering now, I realized, about the man on his bike, who was now, incidentally, removing a bag of corn chips from his bag and passing it around to the rest of the group in a severe and expansive gesture, lording it over the others. He looks like a socialist who could rile up the Nazis, the pretty one with the cleft chin said. See how tan his legs are? He's probably Latin. I bet he thinks that gives him a right. You can tell by the way that guy clutched that bag of chips from the bottom. He didn't want anybody to have more than one or two at a time. Please, those chicken legs, he looks more like something on the menu of a seafood restaurant. Boiled lobster, maybe. Plate of ceviche, maybe. Latin ceviche, said one. He's much too pale to be ceviche. Is there such a thing as Latin ceviche? Said the other. He looks like the kind of person who ties up his wife before he masturbates. He looks like somebody who might slap his friends on the back of the head and then deny it. I bet he gets drunk at bars and hijacks the jukebox to show people some culture. Probably puts on Vivaldi, Chopin, too obvious. Erykah Badu, too exotic. Spoon, I like it. Hey, one of the girls said to me at last, what's your name anyway? And all of a sudden, I don't know why, I wanted to be a character in a Raymond Chandler novel, who always had the right things to say. Someone with 14 telephones with direct lines to Rome, to Paris, and Santa Rosa, whose favorite weapon was a $20 bill. I wanted to show them that my portable bar, which was tended to by my personal assistant, who also happened to be a midget, and who could only be reached from a secret drawer in my filing cabinet. Anyway, all of this, the taserings, the botched manhunt, the growling dogs, and the armed standoff with the crazed man must have went on for something like 30 to 40 minutes. I don't know how long exactly, I'm not very good at keeping track of time, but anyway, I kept looking over at the African man in the park, behind the two girls, a refugee who says he comes from Kenya and talks to himself each day in broken French through the little metal bars of the park. And he reminds me a little of that lab novel some years ago, which scientists said completed the first ever successful piece of art or drawing ever to be produced by an animal. And everyone was all excited about this at first, until later on when they found out that they had to hide their excitement because the drawing merely turned out to depict the bars of the cage that the animal was kept in. Something that surely embarrassed the scientists a little, I imagine. And anyway, that's what this man reminded me of at the moment. I remember thinking also how space and time must have been different for this man, who was forever mumbling things to himself in French, how the space in the air around him appeared soft and maritime. At least that's what I imagined. And I guess I envied him a little. Nobody paid any attention to him. He didn't pay attention to who was paying attention to him. And I have to admit that as long as I stand around on street corners longer than I probably should, lost in time or in space, allowing a little for the air around me to become soft and maritime, for all of that, I still feel remarkably conscious of those moments when I'm becoming lost, so that I'm not ever really lost, not entirely. And anyway, somebody must have tackled me at the ground to get me out of the way, I guess, because I felt my camera phone go flying up into the air. And it wasn't as if I was watching the man depart just then, because I remember seeing very clearly the gun pointed at me by the police, which surely was meant to be pointed at the other man from earlier. And I must have been caught in the background instead. And I do remember after that the police yelling, "Crossfire," and "Hey kid with the camera, get the fuck out of the way." And I honestly didn't realize that they were talking to me, not until later on. Although I do remember looking at them, looking at me through my little camera screen. Okay, I'll just stop. I'll stop right there. It goes on.